Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the CKC channel. I'm your host, FIDE Master Calvin Klaassen, and welcome to another Reflections episode, and a very special episode indeed for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people. And going back in time here, I think this is special for me because this person has won the SA Close many years ago. I think about 20 years before I was born, he won his first SA Championships. So very interesting indeed. And yeah, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to just press the follow button. Will be taking viewer questions halfway through, or about 20 to 25 minutes into the show. So Dr. Bouah will be interviewing our special guest, and after about 20 to 25 minutes, I will jump in and just ask some viewer questions. So don't wait till the last minute, guys. Jump in right now. If you can't type in the chat box, like I said, uh, there's a sign up button usually somewhere at the top. You sign up for free, come back, press the follow button, and you are ready to go in the chat box. So without further ado, I am going to switch over to the reflections library, and over to you, Dr. Bouah.
Calvin, good evening, and good evening, viewers. It's great being with you tonight. It's another Tuesday episode of Reflections. And tonight I've got a very special guest, somebody that I've admired for a very long time. The gentleman goes by the name of David Friedgood. And allow me a moment before I introduce Mr. Friedgood, just to read one or two things from his CV. Mr. Friedgood won the South African Chess Championship in 1967. 1971, 1973, and he also came 7th at the Zonal in 1972. He has represented South Africa at Chess Olympiads in Tel Aviv, 1964, Lugano, 1968, Siegen, 1970, and Nice, 1974. And in Tel Aviv, David Friedgood scored 10 out of 12 on his board. And in the last 3 Olympiads, he played board 1. And after moving to England, he was a member of 2 Great Britain teams which won the World Chess Solving Championships. And in 1986 with Graham Lee and Jonathan Mestel, and in 2007 with John Nunn and Jonathan Mestel. Mr. David Friedgood, welcome to our Reflection Show.
Thank you very much.
David, we've been communicating now for about a year, and I must say that one of your books that you wrote influenced me greatly, and it's The Secrets of Spectacular Chess. And it seems when I looked at your games recently that you've been playing spectacular chess for a very long time. What is your motivation when you play? Is it the beauty of the game, tactics, positional? How would you describe yourself?
You know, that's a very good question. I have come to believe that chess is beautiful, but also beautiful is chess. So when you play a good game, it's beautiful. And when you see beauty in a move, you play that move. And I think a lot of my games are decided, my moves are decided by the attractiveness of the game, or of the move, or the thought behind it. And yeah, I think that's quite important to me. Of
David,
course, it's like intuition, and the intuition is guided by the attractiveness of the move.
Thank you very much for that. And David, that was our kickoff question, but my normal kickoff question will go back to how it all started. Because when I looked at your CV, I realized that you were at least only 18 years old when you played your first Olympiad in Tel Aviv.
That's
so
right.
Where did you learn to play? Because to get to the age of 18 and to play Olympiad standard, how did it all start here in Cape Town?
Yeah, in Cape Town, I actually learned from my cousin, who's almost the same age as me, and I was fascinated by the game immediately, but I didn't know how to proceed with it. My father was a beginner, and we used to play on Saturday afternoons. And it didn't help me very much. But a couple of years later, so around about 9 years old, my father brought back a chess book that a friend of his lent to me, and it was a book by Chernev, or Chernev and Horowitz, it might have been, one of those American books. And it was one of these books where you play a move and they commentate on it. And they had two main themes. One was a dragon variation, and the other one from White's point of view is a collie attack.
Right.
And that book made such a huge impression on me, not so much because of the moves themselves, but because of the very fact that chess was important, that it wasn't draft or Ludo or canasta or anything like that. It was a very important game, an international game. Here is a whole book about chess. And I soon discovered that there were hundreds and thousands of books on chess.
Right.
International, global game. And I became very interested. And once upon a time, my father, my family went to see a person called Simi Lewis.
Right.
And that was the very big piece of luck in starting me off playing proper chess, because Simi Lewis, who you may know his name, he actually is a cousin of my mother.
Right.
And that's how I came to get hold of Simi Lewis. And we came to see him one day on a Sunday afternoon, and we popped in, and he was sitting at his chessboard. And
Right.
He was obviously a little bit annoyed that we were interrupting him. But he sort of turned it around and he said, "Hey, David, you play a bit of chess, don't you? Would you like to see this game?" So I sat down opposite him, and he set up a little position, and he said, "What move do you make?" So I made the right move. And
Good.
I carried on making a few right moves. I think it was probably quite simple. It was like a little combination. And he said, "Well, you definitely can play chess. So come and see my simultaneous exhibition at the Claremont Chess Club." And in those days, the person who won the Western Province Championship used to be obliged to play a simultaneous event in either the Claremont Chess Club or the Cape Town Chess Club.
Okay.
In fact, on that occasion, Simi and Professor Mackey
Right.
tied for the Western Province Championship. So Simi had to give us a simultaneous at the Claremont Chess Club, and Mackey had to give the
At Cape Town.
the simultaneous at the Cape Town Club. But anyway, I went along to the simultaneous event. My father took me. I was 10 years old, and everybody there was grown up. I should say a man.
Yeah.
There weren't any women in those days. And they were so delighted to see this little kid playing chess that Professor Mackey, who happens to have been a professor at UCT, and where my father studied, he asked my father if he could bring me along every Thursday night. And that happened. And of course, once I started playing at the Claremont Chess Club, proceeded quite rapidly to learn the game. I got more chess books, and I became very interested in it. I can tell you lots of little stories about the Claremont Chess Club, but I'm sure there's other things you might need to ask me. So,
No.
I mean, I proceeded from there. I went, I won Claremont Club Championship at some quite early stage, 13 or 14. And I tied for second, I think it was, with Rubinstein in the Western Province Championship of 1959 or something like that, I think it was. And 1959, 1960, no. Yeah, something like that. And anyway, I was, because of somebody withdrawing from the South African Closed Championship, I was the next person in line.
Okay.
And so at age 14, I played in the South African Championship. It must have been 1959, I think, or 1961. You know, there was always an odd-numbered date. And I didn't do brilliantly, but I did learn an awful lot playing some of the top players in the country. And I actually won, you might remember the name Wolfgang Heidenfeld. He wasn't playing in the championship, but he was offering a prize to the best defense. And my best defense was against Rubinstein in an end game, where I got myself into terrible trouble because I didn't know that you should have your pawns in the same color as your bishop, and I put my pawns on the wrong color, and theoretically the game should have been won by Rubinstein, but he tried and tried and tried and tried until I eventually asked the arbiter if it was 3 times, the same position had occurred for 3 times, and it was. The game was drawn. Rubinstein was very annoyed with me because he'd lost a valuable half point in the game, in the tournament. But anyway, I didn't come last, but I think I was 10th out of 14.
Well, it's a good debut. Good debut for someone that young. Now, David, I was intrigued when I realized that at that young age you went to Tel Aviv. And who was South Africa's strongest opponent that you played against in Tel Aviv in '64?
Well, that's a big story. The strongest opponent was the Russian champion Leonid Stein.
Stein, correct.
Yeah, he was one of the great grandmasters. Unfortunately, died quite young.
Yeah, 73.
But he was a brilliant player. And we had, there's a long story which I'll tell you when we have the first game.
Yes.
Because the first game is part and parcel of what happened in that match. Of course, the Russians won the Olympiad, and but it was quite amazing that South Africa was actually playing against the Soviet Union, as it then was. You know, we thought that we were going to be boycotted.
Yes.
But I'll tell you more on that front when we look at the first game.
That's fine, David. You know that's probably the only time South Africa played against Russia ever in that 1964.
I imagine so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've never played against Russia again, even in the modern times. I mean, we were close because in '94 we actually played against the USA on table number 4 in the opening round of the Moscow Olympiad. But we never got to play Russia on board 1 again, as you guys did in that year. I mean, I know, Calvin, they were led by Botvinnik. And of course, I mean, what a brilliant team that was. But David, you had the opportunity to play in Lugano in '68. And at this stage, you were a young man of 22, and you scored a handsome number of points. If I'm not incorrect, you scored 10 out of 12.
No, the 10 out of 12 was in Tel Aviv.
Okay, now 10 out of 12 is a major score, because I mean that's and how did you go about securing that 10 points?
Well, I lost to Stein, and I won 9 games and 8 games, and 9 games. I won 9 games and drew 2. So out of 12, I scored 10. And I probably had some luck along the way. The amusing thing about the way that the Olympiad worked in those days was that you first had a number of preliminary rounds. So they tried to make, I don't know how many there were. In my group, the Soviet Union was the top, obviously the top seeded, and South Africa was the bottom seeded group. And there was, I think, 6 out of 7 games, 6 games, and there was going to have to be an arrangement as to who was going to play against the Russians, which was in the last round of the preliminary group. And so what they did was they said, well, Kirby and Dreyer were our two best players, and were great pioneers of chess in South Africa. So they were going to definitely be in the match. So what they did was Kirby and Dreyer didn't play in the penultimate round of the group. They let us play. So I think I was on second board against Bouah, and we played against Switzerland, that's right. And I won my game, so I was in, and Isaacson drew his game, I think, yes, and so he was in, and the other 2 lost their games. So we lost to Switzerland, but I won and Isaacson drew, so we were able to play against the Russians. And the lineup was Dreyer versus Petrosian, world champion, Kirby versus Botvinnik, former world champion, Friedgood versus Stein, Russian champion. 4th was Isaacson versus Spassky, future world champion.
Yeah.
So, this is the most enormous occasion for me, and I don't think I could ever emulate that.
Yeah.
And it was really quite interesting. I mean, looking at Botvinnik was the most amazing person. He's had this big head, and a very stocky man with round glasses, and so he was next to Stein, and every now and again he would look at our board, but because his eyes were very, he had a quite poor eyesight, relatively speaking, And so instead of just looking at the board, you know, to his left, he actually leant over the board, and you could see this huge head appearing. And I can remember on a few occasions, every time this happened, we looked at Stein. Stein looked at me, and I looked at Stein. We both grinned at each other. I mean, we weren't going to say, excuse us, Mr. Montgomery, you're hampering our sight of the board. It was really hilarious, actually. and actually, after that, Stein often came to watch my games.
Good.
He was really a very sweet guy, but he absolutely smashed me, of course.
Yeah. But I mean, that is certainly one of South Africa's Olympiad highlights. Now, David, we know you played in 64, 68, 70. Was that the one of the Fischer-Spassky games in 1970, I think, where
That's
they played
right.
at Grunfeld?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was playing a chap from, was it the Philippines, Tan. His name is a very good player.
Right.
And the 2 points about that. The main point was that the place was absolutely packed because of the Fischer-Spassky match.
Right.
People were jostling me. You know, they didn't have proper ropes or anything around us. And I don't know why they let so many people in. But anyway, Tan said to me that he wanted a draw. You know, after a few moves, he wanted a draw. I said, I've never done such a thing in my life. Play, you know, 4 moves or something like that. And every time I made a move, he offered me a draw again. And he was and I said to him, all right, well, why are you so keen for a draw? When you know you outrate me, you're a very strong player. He says his coach, who was a Yugoslav called Karaklaj, an IM. He was coaching the Filipino team, and he was making Tan play every game, and Tan was fed up with being, you know, he was very tired and he wanted to have a rest. So I agreed to draw. But I mean, I've had the pleasure of seeing Fischer on at least 2 occasions, and the one in Siegen was quite amusing. I can never forget a time where Oscar Pano was from Argentina, grandmaster, very, very fine player. He apparently had made some sort of friendship with Fischer, and was trying to get Fischer to get introduced to this very pretty girl, and so he was trotting after this girl, and I saw Pano going across her and looked, I see he's going after a girl. He must be quite a womanizer. So then I look to the left and I see Fischer's also trotting after Pano. A funny thing. But in fact, some of our members of the team, I think Pitt and was Albersberg there. I can't remember. I think 2 of them played tennis with Spassky and
yes.
Person.
Yeah, I know Pete Cohen told us about the tennis story as well. And David, coming back to South Africa, I mean, you were playing in the days with Pete Cohen and young Charles de Villiers, as it were, at that time. How was it to play in the South African Closed Championship? I mean, at that particular time, because there seemed to have been a lot of incredibly strong players around, and yet, I mean, you won those titles 3 times, and then you also played in a zonal skill as well. But first, tell us about the SA closed at that time.
Which particular?
Generally that era where you won in 67 and you won in 71 and 73. So but I mean, we know that era was characterized by yourself, Piet Kruin, Charles de Villiers was a young man coming up at that stage. Who were the other strong players as well besides the three of you?
Good question. I think that Donnelly springs to mind, the Rhodesian, or was Rhodesian Zimbabwean. He was very strong. And I'm trying to remember who was, I mean, is Bob Griffiths still around? Albersberg. I must be missing out somebody. I know that on the third occasion, I used to, I was like a coach to Sarnak, Michael Katz, and Andrew Savinson. Once a week, we would have a sort of a coaching session. And particularly Sarnak and Michael were definitely, you know, really promising players. And in fact, I don't think I ever beat Sarnak. And in the 73 event, I lost to him. I think he and Charles ganged up on me a little bit, and they knew my opening theory, and they caught me out quite cleverly. You know, and that was very well played by Sarnak. I think I made a mistake anyway, and I don't I don't have any gripes about it. But the thing about the first event, which I won with one round to spare. I'd already won the event, and the last round I played Pitt, and I mean he absolutely smashed me because I wasn't concentrating. I played a move I'd never played before, all that sort of thing, you know. And so a journalist came up and he accused me of throwing the game. And do you know that I was really shocked at that, because I you know, I was trying to play well, but you know, just wasn't. I was too sort of trigger happy, or whatever you might call it.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't concentrate. But you know, in a sense, maybe I did throw the game. The interesting thing about it was that this was held in Johannesburg in '67, and the mayor of Johannesburg threw a tea party for the players, and I had, during the course of the event, I turned 21.
Yes.
And the secretary of the mayor came up to me, and she was really cross with me. She said, "How dare you spend public money on your 21st birthday? How could the mayor throw a party for a kid whose 21st birthday party?"
Yeah, not understanding that at the age of 21, you were the South African chess champion at that stage. David, those are really wonderful memories. I mean, you've played the very best in the world. I mean, guys like Stein and others. And I've got one more question before Calvin asks one or two questions from the chat room. how did your interest in problems and composing start?
Now that is also interesting. I don't actually know exactly where the study started. There's two different things. The one is
Okay,
endgame studies, and the other is chess problems. And the two are generally called chess compositions because
right.
people compose studies and they compose problems. Um, Now, I started composing studies because I was just fascinated by endgame studies, and I thought I'd have a go. And in fact, I had my first study was published in the British Chess magazine, and the editor compared my study with a study of one of the all-time greats, Leonid Kubel,
Right.
who was a great problemist and study composer, absolute giant of a composer. Compared his study when he was first got a study, which when he was 14,
Sure.
just the same as me, and my study was much more complex than his study. So, but
Good
you
compliment.
know, I'm still dining out on that because I never got anywhere near the greatness of Kubel. But anyhow, what happened is that Nick Barnett, once upon a time, he was a great friend, still is, and he came and picked me up from my home, and he in his little Mini, and he took me to a chap called Donald McIntyre. And Donald McIntyre, I think he was an expat from Britain, and he 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 and Nicholas, who was by then already quite proficient in problem composing, they sat me down and they discussed, who was it going to be, and all these names came up: Lushinsky, Rudenko, and so on and so forth. And then they decided on this game, on this position, which was a three-mover, white to play and mate in three moves. And, to me, this all looked like junk. There was white was hopelessly overpowering the black. Any kid could win against the world champion. It was so ridiculous. But you have to mate in three moves.
Right.
And to do that in three moves, there's only one way to go, only one way to do it. And that immediately challenged me. Moreover, it made me, they explained to me that this is not just a puzzle. These people are not making chess compositions just to make people find it difficult and then eventually have a nice surprise when they find the solution. No, they have things called themes. And once I understood what a theme was,
Right.
there are hundreds of different themes. And you can even invent new themes. That to me was a whole field of endeavor. It was something that you can do on your own. You didn't have to spend a lot of money. You didn't have to do anything. You just had your chess set, maybe a chess problem magazine, or a book or anthology of the person's chess play. It's just like reading poetry or listening to music.
Yeah.
And I've got hundreds of chess problem books and study anthologies and so on. I composed quite a bit when I was in my teens, but gradually real life stepped in, had
Mm.
other interests, and I
It
had to,
does.
I was at school and so on, and university, and so I stopped composing gradually over the years, and then when I came to England, um, they started chess problem solving tournaments, and I and Graham Lee, we tied for first in the first official tournament in British Championship, and Lee got the first prize because he used less time than I did. We both scored 100%, I think, and but he used less time than me, and that started me off, and the way that actually what made me interested in solving problems was because I needed to see the solution. I wanted to enjoy the solution. I wanted to see the theme. I wanted to see how well it was constructed, all that kind of thing. It's like looking at a piece of art. And that's
David,
what chess problems are about.
that's fantastic and fascinating. And I think, Calvin, we may need to invite Mr. David Friedgood for a problem-solving afternoon one day on your show, because I think I've been inspired with some of the things relating to paradox, to geometry, and I've used some of these even in my own reflections, I must tell you, David, and I'll send you an article that I wrote about some of your orthodox and all the other things that one can read about in Secrets of Spectacular Chess. But David, there's 2 or 3 questions in the chat box. Maybe Calvin wants to just tell us, ask those questions or the comments, and then we'll go to 1 or 2 games with your permission, David.
Sure.
Calvin, over to you.
Okay, so very interesting stuff thus far, guys. Thoroughly enjoying it. So David, I've got 1 or 2 questions, not too many, in the chat box. So the first one comes from Patrick Ying. He was also on our show in the last season. And Patrick is a usual guy on our show as well in the chat box. So thanks, Patrick. And Patrick is referring to something that you guys were talking about earlier about the book. He says, he's asking, the book mentioned earlier, is it perhaps Logical Chess, Move by Move by Chernev? That perhaps a book that was relevant in your conversation earlier on.
He may well be right. I'm sorry, but I can't be certain about that.
Yes.
But it sounds right.
Yes, indeed.
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
All right. So thanks, Patrick, for that question. And then we have from Sean Wallenberg. Thanks, Sean, also for joining us in the chat. Sean says, just a compliment, so not a question. Sean has been telling us in the chat box, he's been enjoying the show very much. But he says, just a compliment. Wow, 10 out of 12 on an international platform. Absolutely brilliant. Well done, David, Dr. Bouah. Is that an essay record? So a question towards London. Is that perhaps an essay record, what David achieved?
I think, Calvin, in my memory, I cannot recall at an Olympiad that somebody has betted a score of 10 out of 12 in that preliminary group. And of course, as we know from about the early 90s, there's only been the 13 round Swiss. And I'm actually going to go research some records, but I think, David, you may still be maintaining that 10 out of 12 score on that. I can't recall in modern Olympiad history, and I've been part of the Olympiad setup for about 30 years now. I cannot recall a better score than that, Calvin.
Yeah, now, and just to add on top of that, London, 10 out of 12 with a loss to Stein. You can almost just add that to that performance. So yeah, thanks for that, Sean. And then Patrick also has another question here. So did David Friedgood ever won the Claremont Chess Club Championship? And who were his rivals at the time in South Africa? So did you ever win the Claremont Chess Club Championships, David?
Yeah, I think I won it at least once, maybe twice, I'm not sure. what happened with my family is that we moved to Johannesburg just before age 16. So, in fact, my number of years at the Claremont Club was only about 5, I think, roughly. Anyway, yes, I remember Lowe, Mr. Lowe, L-O-W, who was a relatively elderly man already, but got quite strong. And I think Professor Mackey himself was still playing. Really difficult to remember these. I'm not sure if Mr. Snook was
Yeah,
actually
Ari Snook
playing.
may have been. Ari Snook would have been around as well, because
Yeah.
he was quite an age when I started playing against him in the early 90s already.
Yeah, I think. Oh, and there was a very nice man called Hofstrasser. And Hofstrasser was a really good player. And he befriended me quite a lot. He had me over quite a few times. We lived in Newlands.
Okay.
And so it was quite easy to get to him. Those are the main. There's a chap called Helsingen. I don't think I can't recall any of the ones who played in the Western Province Championship. I think most of those people were in the Cape Town club.
Okay.
My memory
that's
is
fine.
really patchy, I'm afraid.
No,
Okay.
that's quite fine on that side.
All
No,
right.
thank you very much. And David, just to tell you that Patrick has played for Mauritius over 110 games at the Olympiad.
Wow, that's a good record to have, isn't it?
Yep, a seven-time Mauritian champion. So Calvin and David, shall we look at one or two of your games, David, that you could perhaps show us tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll
Just
show you,
before that.
one.
Sorry, David. Just one last comment in the chat box just before we switch over to the chessboard. So Sean also just said, Calvin, I have no questions left for David. I just want him to know that I am thoroughly enjoying his fascinating stories about our chess icons. Hearing it from the horse's mouth is a peach. Thanks. And that's from Sean Wallenberg. So that's our last comment in the chat box. Thanks, Sean. And yeah, now we can switch over to the chessboard. Sorry for interrupting you there, David. So you can let us know with which game you want to start.
We'll start with the Bouah one.
Bouah, great.
Max Bouah was an international master, although you probably won't think he is one because he played very poorly. But what happened, I've already mentioned how we how I got into the team for to play against the Russians was because I beat Bouah, and so it's a memorable sporting moment,
yes,
rather than a great piece of chess.
Yes. Okay. Interesting.
So
you can navigate us through it, and then you can let us know where we can stop.
You know, I've got to dash and just get my. Hang on a minute. No, I'm sorry. You need to do that for me because I haven't got my book in front of me.
Okay, so I can read the moves out for you if you want to.
Yeah,
we can do that. So okay, so you've got the black pieces here. So you can just let me know when I should slow down or when you want us to stop and pause. So e4, c5, we see a Sicilian, knight f3, pawn to d6, bishop b5 check, we see a Moscow variation, bishop d7, bishop takes d7.
I should just say that nobody's ever played bishop b5 check against me before. Didn't know anything about it, and you know, in those days people didn't know much about their openings. You know, they just played chess. So I think I knew that bishop d7 was the right move, and in fact, actually, you can play knight d7 as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so he swapped the bishop. Bishop takes, queen takes.
Yes. Pawn to c4, going for
Pawn
a
to
bind
c4
structure.
Now that's a Marozzi bind.
Yes.
And I got quite a shock when he played the c4 because I thought, gosh, he's got rid of his bad
bishop for this pawn structure. Yes.
Exactly.
Looks like a good way.
He's already got me in a grip, and I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of carried on playing normal moves.
And I can tell you, David, I kind of glanced at this game. And while I was glancing at the game a couple of days ago or earlier on, it was amazing for me to see that what you are playing is quite still relevant. Like they play it nowadays up till now. Like I remember Magnus Carlsen versus Anand, very recent game. And you telling me that you didn't really know what you were doing and you're playing like modern theory. So quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed.
Yes, it's these, chess openings are like, fashion.
Yes.
Like there's been a Gyoko piano. The Gyoko piano is an ancient opening. And
it's back now again.
All the top players are playing it.
Yes.
It's really funny. Anyway, so I played knight c6, I think.
Yes, knight c6 castle. Then you continued with g6 when shadowing the bishop in Sicilian dragon style. Or to d4.
Subsequently, after knight c6 castles,
yes,
I subsequently learned that quite a nice trick for black in this position is instead of playing g6 immediately, playing knight f6.
Yes, knight c3.
Knight e3. Knight d4.
Okay.
And that stops the Marozzi bind.
So that's
ideal.
I guess that's the reason why nowadays they play d4 earlier instead of castling. Yes. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and if you play knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, which is a bit embarrassing. So
yes, e4 pawn is also okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, a castle. I played g6.
Yes.
And
pawn to d4 takes. Bishop g7.
G7.
3. Knight f6.
Knight f6.
Pawn to f3. Castle.
Castles.
Knight c3. And the rook f to c8.
So I just want to say, David, when I saw this position the first time, I thought this looks like a modern day sort of dragon, really, except the queen is on d7. Normally it would be on d8. But I just thought this can't be a game of the late 60s, but because you've been playing modern chess all through. So, I mean, as Calvin said, I mean, these moves are strong, natural and strong, and you found him at the board?
Well, as I said, I liked the dragon in that time, but I was too lazy to learn the variations because they're very, very tricky. But I was actually a naturally good player of openings at that time when people were not very au fait with theory, with opening theory. So I could usually make my way quite well because I actually quite enjoy the opening. In this particular case, I think I felt at the time that I was being caught out.
Okay.
And that I was doing my best, but I didn't know that what I was doing was right. I had to do rook fc8 because I knew that I wanted to play a6. And if they want to try and get into b6, if the knight or bishop gets into b6, I want to be able to to drop the queen back to d8.
Right.
So that was the main reason for moving the rook there.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So at this point, I thought he should be starting to be a bit clever and hold down my counterattack, but he didn't. He just played.
Pawn to b3.
Was it pawn to b3?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pawn to b3.
Okay, that's fair enough. He's got to do that.
Yes. Pawn to a6.
This is where I started being worried, because he could play knight to d5 or even knight to a4, threatening knight takes knight, and knight to
b6.
Well, yes. Knight to b6 is immediate, and I didn't want to take the knight on d5 because yes. he could capture with either pawn, but probably with the e pawn. Yes. And pressure that then he's got a semi-open file on
pressure on the e7 pawn. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of space as well.
Yes.
But he didn't do that. He didn't sort of seem to want to attack. Other good moves, I think, for white are actually to avoid exchange of pieces, playing knight d to e2 or to c2. Both of those are interesting moves, which I would regard as being quite good.
Okay.
But he just played queen d2, which okay, that's a reasonable developing move.
Yes.
So I continued, I think, with rook a b8.
b8, yes.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm going to get b5 in, because yes. he doesn't seem to be interested in doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And so he played, what did he play? King a, no.
Played rook a to c1.
Yeah, rook a c1.
He's just sort of going through the motions, whereas I'm yes. trying to do something.
Yes.
Knight takes d4.
You first played pawn to b5, which is quite a nice little nuance here.
Yeah.
In other types of positions as well. It seems like b5 is well guarded for white, but of course after c takes b5, then you play knight takes d4.
You never know, you might make a mistake and then I can
yes.
play b4.
Yes, yes.
Or b takes e4.
So he took on b5, you played knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, then a takes b5. So you got in your break.
Yeah. And in fact, this I think threatens b4. And I thought, maybe he should play pawn to b4 himself. But then of course I get rook c4, which might be quite strong.
Oh, and you can double up. Or well, looks interesting, yes.
Yeah, so I think already black's got a tiny edge in this position, perhaps. In fact, I thought what he could do is play a4. Yeah. And he gets a passed pawn. I don't think I can do terribly much to harm him.
Probably pawn takes.
Yeah, and then it's it would probably fizzle out to be a draw, I think, in that case.
You could probably play rook a8. Keep your eye on the pawn. Doesn't seem like the pawn is going anywhere, so I think it's chances for both sides. But interesting position. Definitely, I don't think black should be unhappy at.
Rook c4 was always in the air.
But sometimes rook takes bishop even. Tactical possibility. Yeah. So a4 was definitely an idea over there for white, but your opponent seemed to again just go through the motion here, you say.
I think he was trying to just play simple moves and wait for me to make a mistake. But, you know, I don't think that's the right way to play chess.
So your opponent now
Anyway,
played bishop takes knight.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
Yes.
I mean, in the long run, my bishop's going to be better than his knight, I reckon.
Yes.
Um,
Bishop, and he jumped forward knight to d5.
yeah, and obviously the knight's not going to be able to stay there. So, you know, I think already black must be better here.
Drop back bishop g7.
Yeah, and he played
king to h1.
Into h1, which is a reasonable move, but I can still carrying on. I want to play rook c5 here, but that will lose
The
because
queen.
rook takes rook, pawn takes rook, knight f6, check and wins the queen.
Yeah.
So I played queen b7.
7, yes. And then he played pawn to h3. Seems like a move that shows your opponent doesn't really have much to do here.
Well,
Okay, he has to relieve his back rank.
He hasn't got any idea of what to do.
No.
A man with a Marozzi bind should know what to do. Anyway, so this was a great moment for me. Now I definitely get the advantage with rook c5.
Nice.
And there's not much you can do about it, I think.
So you're just threatening to maybe double up on the file.
Yes. And if he takes my backward pawn is a potential passed pawn, I can play bishop to d4 if I like.
Yes.
You know, things like that. Chases knight away.
6 and 1, so looks quite promising.
Yeah. So what did he do now?
So he played pawn to b4, picking the rook. Then you proceeded with rook c4.
Yeah, as expected.
And
now
then
this is the I think the good thing that about it, the enterprising way I played on this occasion was to let him have two passed pawns.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And, you know, because I could see that I would get two passed pawns as well.
Yes.
So maybe he thought, aha, at last he's made a mistake. So he took the rook.
Pawn takes c4.
And pawn takes.
Then he played the rook b1, of course, just supporting the b4 pawn because e6 will be coming soon, picking the knight.
That's right. So I played e6, right?
E6, knight to c3 back.
Yeah.
And rook d8, just supporting your d pawn.
Yeah, just very simple.
Yes.
You know, and he can't do much about it.
So, because he can't do much about it, your opponent decided to carry on with his passed pawn, so he played a4.
Yeah. And I played d5.
d5, and now we start to see black strategy. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and it's a duel of whose passed pawns are faster.
That's right. So what did he play? b5 or a4?
Pawn to a5 was played, then pawn to d4.
Yeah.
And at this moment, yes.
This one of Kurt Dreyer's little expressions is that black pawns are faster than white.
Yes, we've definitely heard that one here in Cape Town. So that's quite interesting. So yes, we have to push our passed pawns, d4, and the interesting thing is we're not threatening d takes c3 yet because the rook is hanging. So your opponent continues by playing pawn to b5, and he's storming off with these pawns as well.
Yeah. So I have this very cute little what is it? A backwards move, which has two threats, obviously. Queen takes pawn and pawn takes knight.
Queen a8.
At the same time, I avoid losing a tempo when he plays pawn
pushes
to
it. Yes, yeah, I like that move. Quite a nice move. 8, multiple threats and prophylaxis.
So he played knight to e4.
4. And we keep on rolling. Pawn to c3.
Yeah.
Queen to d3. And of course, the whole point of playing pawn to c3 here is that you blocked the white queen, so now you can play queen takes a5. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's really game over, but he plays on a few more moves.
Yes, he pushed his pawn to b6.
Yeah.
You play the rook b8, blockading it. Pawn to b7.
Yeah.
Queen to c7. Trying to round up the last counterplay of white. Queen to a6, protecting it. But that, of course, leaves some holes behind the back.
Yeah.
And you played pawn to c2, threatening the rook, distracting it from the support on b7. So after rook c1, rook takes b7. And after queen a8 check, rook b8, white had to resign.
Well, he wants to play rook takes c2.
Aha, rook takes c2.
But that's rook b1 checkmate. So that's why he plays queen a8.
First.
Rook b8, and then he resigned because rook takes c2, rook takes queen, rook takes queen, rook a1 check,
bishop
king h2, bishop e5 check.
Beautiful finish.
Yeah.
That wouldn't help either for white.
Yeah.
Beautiful finish. It seemed like after that, it's quite nice. You mentioned that after your opponent secured the two pass pawns on the side, it seemed very clinical from your side. Like your strategy just came through easily. Maybe someone that glances through the game quickly might think, okay, there's still some double-edged play, but your Rex was just winning with the support of the bishop and the rook from
the strange thing about this game is that you hardly needed to think about, you didn't have to calculate very much.
Yes.
You just had to make a judgment and implement it.
Beautiful.
I haven't played many games like that, I must say, where it's, if you take the right course, it all just flows without much difficulty at all.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but this was a great game. I enjoyed it. Well done. Well done, David.
This is one of the 10 out of 12, Calvin.
Aha, okay.
Yes, well, this is the one that got me into the match against the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And I consider it as a sporting game, a sporting moment or memorable moment.
Yes.
Rather than a great game of chess where my opponent was rather feeble.
David, which game would you like me to go to now?
What's the chronology? That was 64, then 68 was
Max, the
next one.
Fuller game.
Yeah, that's the Fuller game. That was the initial game that I thought of as a memory.
Well, it's a beautiful game. We must show the viewers that game, David. I mean, Calvin, the next game that David will show is a beautiful game.
Okay.
Okay, so David's got the white piece in this one.
Up my pieces.
No problem. And Max Fuller has got the black pieces. And is this what tournament is this? Olympiad Lugano.
Olympiad Lugano, 68, and he's from Australia.
I've got to tell you a quick point about the Lugano Olympiad. Fischer was briefly there in the American team. When our group arrived at the hotel, we were waiting in line, to register. When the manager of the hotel, this hotel is a very, very posh hotel, not something I could normally afford. This manager came down the stairs and he was almost crying. And he burst into a huge speech to everybody in the lobby. We were absolutely aghast. And he said, "Who is this person? Is he mad? I have Jackie, Jackie Kennedy, Sophia Loren." He reels off all these famous names that have occupied this suite in this hotel.
Yes.
And what he was mad about was that it was Bobby Fischer didn't like that room.
Oh no.
The room overlooked. I mean, our room was fantastic, and we looked over Lake Lugano as one of the most beautiful sights on earth. And Bobby Fischer didn't want to have a beautiful sight on earth because it would distract him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Subsequently, he mooched around a little bit and decided to go home. And while he was mooching around, he was sitting with his teammates, having a meal, and the food was out of this world too. And he would have in his hand, like this, he'd have in his hand one of those little wallet sets that you get, you stick the little flat pieces in
magnetic,
in the slot. And he had large hands, beautiful hands, and he could flick those pieces all with one hand. He would just hold it like this and flick, flick, flick. He was looking at this game on this wallet. He wasn't talking to anybody.
Sure.
Wow. Okay.
That's another photo that I have in my memory.
Okay,
Anyway,
interesting stuff. Interesting.
Yeah, let's carry on with Friedgood versus Fuller.
Okay.
So this is the C4.
D4, knight F6, knight C3, G6, 4, D6, D4. So
the reason I play this sequence is because I don't like getting involved in the
Grunfeld. Yes, some anti-Grunfeld move order.
Yeah. In fact, they can do it if they really want to.
But white won't have D4 in.
D5 on move 2.
Yes. Then white can switch to some systems with D3 and so on. So you don't have to play a pure Grunfeld. Right. Okay. Yeah. So bishop to G7, bishop E2, castle, bishop G5. So your opponent playing, is this the Averbach, Linden, or what is this?
Averbach, yeah.
Yes, Averbach.
I still play it occasionally in the hope that nobody will remember the moves. Because it hasn't been played for a long time.
Yes, nowadays they have.
Even at this time, I noticed that was it Ullmann? Ullmann was a great proponent of this variation, and he'd stopped playing it. So I assume that,
must be something
it's finito, there's no more teeth left in this. He's playing something else. But anyway, Fuller and I weren't that fussy about our moves and so forth. So our openings, that is.
Right. So Fuller continued with C5.
Has he castled?
Yeah, he's castled already. Castle and then bishop to G5.
Yeah.
Right.
And then C5, which is probably the best way to meet this. You can also play knight BD7 or knight A6 as well.
Yes.
I played D5. You can play D takes C5, but it's not.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So,
yeah. Pawn to D5, pawn to E6.
Yeah, so we're sort of coming into a Benoni variation.
Knight to F3, pawn takes D5, C takes D5, pawn to H6. Bishop drops back to H4.
Again, you can take with the E pawn as well.
Yes. It's possible, yes.
But I thought when you take CD, you're still keeping that restriction with the E pawn covering F5 and so forth. And of course, you're capturing towards the center with C takes D.
Yes.
Yeah, the C takes D is obviously a very different thing, but sometimes there's quite a good way of swapping a lot of pieces off. When you take with the E pawn, you swap all the rooks and the queens off, and then white can get a little edge in the endgame.
Yeah.
Especially if black has played A6.
Yes, there's some weaknesses there.
It's a very deep but interesting point.
Yes.
Nobody's ever played it against me, so I don't try E takes D5 myself. Because
Right.
I prefer a more complex game.
Yes. E takes D5 was played. Pawn to H6. Bishop dropped back to H4.
Yeah.
And your opponent decided to go G5 immediately.
Yeah. Well, this is all theory, or
Okay.
was all theory. Knight H5.
Knight H5. Knight to D2. Knight takes bishop on G3. H takes G3.
Yeah.
Queen E7.
Queen E7, yeah. There's some finesse between Queen E7 and Knight BD7, but I don't think it's worth going into that.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about this is that white's got this file on the H file.
Yes.
Which at the moment you can't do much with, but it does sort of mean that the black bishop is pinned down.
Yes. Pending H6. Yeah.
So I played G4, I think.
G4, interesting move. Just, clamping on the light squares.
Yes. I think theoretically I was supposed to play Queen C2 instead, which also clamps on the F file, F5. But anyway, it probably comes to the same thing. I know that Fuller and I weren't in the book. Well, we didn't know that this was a book or not.
So G4 you played?
Yeah, and he played
Knight to A6.
Knight to A6. Now I think that might be a mistake. I'm not sure.
Maybe Knight D7, Knight E5, or even sometimes F6 if just to get the knight closer to the king.
That's right. and also leaves the bishop open after the knight's on E5. I mean, that's what a pawn on G4 is. G5 is for, to secure the knight on E5.
Yes.
But you know, he's trying to play the regular kind of Benoni thing where you get a pawn B5 pushed eventually.
Knight C7 and B5, rook B, so on.
So I played Queen C2.
Yes.
But what did I play?
Queen C2 and then Knight to C7 was played. And then you played A4, just hindering B5.
That's right.
Pawn to B6.
Yeah.
And then another interesting move you played next.
Yeah. A mysterious rook move.
Aha. And then now this is not just a random thought. Now this rook A3 looks strange. Okay, that has been seen in some of these like Indian games, King's Indian games and so on. But this move also, with myself growing up, I looked at a lot of Kasparov games, and there's also a mysterious rook A3 in the Rai Lopez that Kasparov used with rook A3 and rook E3 and so on. So I've got a feeling that rook on A3 can be venomous.
I subsequently had another game where I was I won very nicely with rook A3 in a Benoni kind of setup. It wasn't exactly the same, but I could tell you about that one a bit later.
Okay. All right. So rook A3 played.
This rook A3 can be on B3. Where it can
B5,
the B6 pawn, and And it can be on E3, it could even be on F3 in some situations, or on H3. So I was already thinking about what I was going to do now, because this black knight is not on D7.
Yes.
Or on E5 for that matter. I had already started thinking about what's going to happen in a few moves.
Yes.
Mm.
Okay.
So he played
Pawn to
A6.
A6, continuing in his traditional Benoni style here.
Right. I played knight C4.
Knight C4, hitting B6.
Yeah.
Rook B8, protecting B6.
Yes. Now he's ready for B5, so I've got to start getting on with it.
Yes.
So the getting on with it is what?
A thematic thrust.
Yes.
Center. I love this move. And the timing is always important. So you continued with pawn to E5. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah. That's it.
So it seems like it's not possible if you just look immediately. Where is covered. 1 by the bishop, 2 by the pawn and the queen, 3.
But so pawn takes pawn, he loses the knight with pawn to
immediately
D6.
with pawn to D6, yes.
And bishop takes pawn, he loses the H pawn, which is the important feature of this whole game. So he can't take the pawn. So he plays knight to E8, which is virtually the only move.
Oh, very sad move to play, but okay, yes, he has to.
Not necessarily, because if he plays pawn takes pawn, he can blockade on D6.
Mm.
I could see that he wasn't terribly fussed about it.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
See what you mean.
I think the next move is what got him fussed. And that was knight to E4.
Knight to E4, the knights are rushing to the center. And you're kind of opening up the third rank here for your A3 guy.
There you go.
So
that
everything
is what I was aiming at.
Everything is making sense now, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's got to take the pawn now.
Yes, too much pressure on
D6.
D6.
Anything better.
Yeah.
And I pushed. I don't know if I should have pushed immediately, but because after pawn D6, he could actually play queen E6, which doesn't look right.
Queen to E6.
I think neither of us realized it. I can play knight takes G5 because you can't take back queen to H7, mate.
Yes.
But he plays queen G6 quite calmly. And I think he's doing okay, because if I move the knight back to E4,
yes.
Firstly, there's a problem on he could maybe play B5. I'm not sure, but the G pawn is on pre.
Yes.
Right there, bishop takes pawn, and maybe it's not anything special. I don't know. Because you can follow with F5, and
yes,
it gets a bit tricky.
Seems like black kind of slipped out of it here slightly.
Slightly. I would say that it might have been still plus over equals for white.
Yes. Okay.
But
definitely a fighting chance.
Necessarily want to go queen E6 and just give up the G5 pawn type of thing because of the mate.
Yeah.
Yes. No. Knight takes G5 is a.
Well, we both thought that it's knight takes G5 resigns kind of thing.
Yes.
But it isn't. So anyway, he played queen to D8 to keep an eye on the G pawn.
Yes.
And now comes the wonderful rook A to H3.
Yes. So Landon and David, the saying: if you say A, you have to say B. Looks like in this case, if you say A, you have to say H.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there we go. Everybody's in the attack now.
Yeah. The thing is that this is a sacrifice that has to be made, and there's nothing he can do about it, but there's also nothing I can do about it either.
Has to happen.
It's so incredibly committal,
Yes.
and I don't know, it just seemed right to me.
Very natural as well, yes. So
I think-
he continues
I
with B5, yeah.
I think I must say to Lyndon, can you see what I mean about beauty in chess?
I can see the beauty, and I also realize that all your pieces except for your king is on light squares. So there's certainly some dominance and geometry coming through as well, David.
Yes.
Beautiful stuff,
So,
yeah.
So he has two significant attempts. The one was B5.
Yes, what happened in the game.
To force my hand, or F5.
Or F5, interesting.
F5 was the one that I was worried about.
Yes.
And you know, I hadn't calculated this carefully, and I was still thinking about F5, what I was going to do when he played B5.
Yes.
But I'll give you a quick overview of knight takes of F5. The answer is knight takes E5. That's the best move.
Okay. So ignoring the threat on E4, offering another knight, so black can basically have his pick of which knight he wants to capture.
Yeah. You know, you've just reminded me of an endgame study that I composed, which is
okay.
in which white has a knight threatened, and the other knight puts itself on prise as well.
Interesting stuff.
At the same time, we've got two knights.
So
anyway, that's just a little thought. This is actually a forced win. Knight takes E5. I didn't know when I was playing it, of course, but it starts off with pawn takes knight on E4, bishop C4 check.
Bishop C4 check.
Yes.
Okay.
King H7.
Yes.
Queen takes E4 check.
Okay.
Bishop F5.
Pawn takes, I guess.
Pawn takes bishop.
Knight F6.
Knight. Well, I think best is knight takes pawn on D6.
Oh, okay, yeah. Knight takes pawn and hitting the queen as well, yeah.
Queen C2.
Yes.
I think he has to play rook F6 to stop pawn F6.
Yes. Yeah.
And then bishop E6. And I haven't lost anything, I don't think. And
G4 could be coming.
Yeah, and it's pretty hopeless for black.
Yeah, that's a beautiful variation. White just calmly doing what he needs. So yeah, the light square is basically a big weakness here for black. And then just a quick question. So after knight takes E5, what happens after bishop takes E5? Do we just proceed with rook takes H6 or what?
Yes. Hang on a sec. Let me just put my pawns back. Bishop takes E5. So that's a pawn, black pawn on F5.
So black has just
H6.
Takes H6.
Oh, sorry, do I check? Yeah, check first, I think.
Check first, maybe.
Check first, king G7 or rook F7. It doesn't actually matter.
Then rook H6.
And then rook takes H6.
Yeah. Looks kind of scary. Rook H7, rook H6, other rook coming in, and it's...
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
There's also bishop H5 to take the rook, or I don't know. It's quite a lot of... there's a lot going on, but it's all in white's favor.
Yes.
Rook G6, knight takes G5. You know, he can't take on D6 with a knight, which might be helpful.
Yeah, no, it definitely looks convincing. So yeah, coming back to the game now. So f5 was
Yeah.
definitely an interesting option for black. Would have required white to play white.
Accurately.
Yeah, I would have had to work it all out.
Yeah.
I think I was on the way to doing that because when you've got two knights on prees,
Can't hold back.
the thing is that you just have to play, you sort of get forced into playing the right move, in my opinion, anyway.
Yes.
In this particular position, you can't just say, oh dear, I better save my knight or something like that.
Start playing slow. You can't look back. Just need to go forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably lose.
So yeah, and so instead of f5, your opponent decided to play b5.
Yeah. And what did I do?
After b5, rook takes h6 happened. So ignoring b5, the threat on c4,
Yeah.
and crashing through on h6.
Yep.
So bishop takes rook takes bishop on h6. And then, of course, the threat on h7 is becoming bigger now. So f5 was played now.
No, too late.
Yes, and the rook g6. Rook invading. Knight to g7 played.
Yeah, that is best, I think, still. Otherwise, I come in with
knight takes e5. Yes, if king f7, then knight takes e5 with check and covering.
Calvin, I wanted to make the point, David and Calvin, that before knight g7, I thought the game was Fischer random 960.
Oh, well, the pieces at the back.
All black pieces were on the back rank.
Yeah, the rook is doing quite a powerful check on g6. Knight g7 is forced. Knight takes e5 again. We've seen knight takes e5 in other variations. So queen to e8. Glancing at the knight on e5 and keeping an eye on the rook on g6.
Yeah, I can't remember this. There's a very important thing that because I've still got the bishop, I can play queen to b3 check, and if he plays c4, then bishop takes pawn.
Yes,
check. And
that's quite interesting.
I might have to take his rook eventually, or else I know maybe queen h3, depending on which way you go.
Also another resource,
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay, so after queen e8.
Queen e8 seemed quite a reasonable move, yeah.
Seems quite reasonable, yes. Knight takes g5 was played.
Yeah.
And your opponent now proceeded to capture the knight on e5, trying to get rid of some pieces around, close to his king.
Yeah, right.
And then your move comes in that you spoke about just now, queen to b3 check.
Yeah.
And black played bishop e6. Of course, if he played c4, like you said, then you can either play bishop takes c4 check or queen h3. You mentioned.
The bishop is pinned at the moment.
Oh, the bishop is pinned. Yeah. So queen h3 probably something like this.
Right, yeah.
The threat of queen h7.
So the queen follows the rook. There's actually a problem theme.
Yes.
Where you have a rook going and then the queen following, or the queen going and the rook following, called the Bristol theme. Anyway.
Okay,
so
interesting.
Bishop e6.
Bishop e6. It seems like the third rank is the highway here for the heavy pieces. Quite heavy. Bishop e6. Queen to h3, of course.
Yeah.
Black creating some space for the king to run rook f to e8. Queen h7 check. King f8. And maybe a bit of calculation here.
Yeah. Rook takes bishop, I think.
Rook takes bishop.
You see how the pawn on d6 is important.
Aha, yeah. Stopping the king from running away.
Yeah.
Just about everything on my side of the board is important. If I didn't have a b2 pawn, for example, queen a1 check would be destructive.
Yes, indeed. And now, of course, knight takes e6 is not possible because of queen f7 mate.
Yeah. Rook takes queen h8, mate.
H8, mate. Beautiful. So black had to, unfortunately for him, give up his queen. Queen takes e6. Knight takes e6. Knight takes e6. And g takes f5. So knight had to run again. So knight to d8. Black's pieces are not coordinating nicely, yeah?
Sorry, I'm not. Knight takes e6. Rook takes e6, right?
Yes, rook takes e6. Then queen takes e6 was played. Then knight takes e6 check. Knight takes e6. Then g takes f5. And then knight to d8.
Okay.
Then you proceeded with f6. Threatening mate in 1. Black played the rook b7, trying to cover that rank.
Yep.
Okay. And the pawns keep on marching. Pawn to d7, cutting off the rook and threatening queen g7 mate again, and the e8 rook. So yeah, black unfortunately again needed to give up some more material. Rook takes d7. The threats were just too much. Queen takes d7. Knight f7, and a bit of
I don't know why I didn't resign.
yeah, a couple of moves further. King f1. Let's just scroll through the rest. King f1, rook e5, queen c8 check, rook e8 back, queen takes pawn check, king g8, and bishop h5, and finally resignation. The knight being pinned onto the rook. And
I didn't realize it went on so long.
Aha.
But David, it's a wonderful game because, you know, when I looked at the game, I noticed that your knight on c4 was hanging, your knight on e4 was hanging, and then you gave up the knight on e5.
e5, yes.
And you know, Calvin, that highway, rook to a3 to h3, and then if one looks carefully, the rook just gives itself up on h6. So, I mean, for me, a well-played game, excellent, and I think it's one of the highlights of an Olympiad game for me.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one very important point to mention.
Yes.
My opponent congratulated me, I must say. Fuller was very good. He said that you played fantastically.
Okay.
But what was amazing, that's never happened before or after, I can tell you, was that there was a little knot of people watching the game. And a little crowd gathered because, you know, when some people are watching a game, then other people come and have a look.
Yeah,
and
of course.
They could see that, you know, there was quite a lot of pieces flying around. And when he resigned, somebody threw coins on the board. You know, that's an ancient tradition.
Yep.
And when they want this great piece of work, they throw gold coins on the board. I don't remember if they were gold coins, but you know, obviously they wanted to make an impact, and that to me was a tremendous feeling, you know.
Yeah.
Somebody really appreciated this, and they were at the moment, you know, they were at the climax.
Yeah, no, it's a great game, David. You can be proud of this game. I mean, all your pieces interacted. That bishop on e2, it stood there for a long time, and it makes the final move in the game. You know.
Yeah, no, brilliant game over there, David. And I get what you're saying about the beauty of the game. I mean, this is definitely a tremendous achievement. So well done, and thanks for showing us this one.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. David, we've got time to look at maybe from that move 31 or 32 in the 1972 game. Would you like to show us that one, Calvin? It's the first one on the puzzle.
Against Ljubovich.
Yes.
Ljubovich.
Yeah, I think let's go because of the time. Let's go to move 30 or 31. David, we can give you the position on the board, and then you can maybe take us through that one.
Yeah, okay.
Move 31, you said, Lennon.
Yeah, move 31.
After the diagram should be it should show the position after move 31 by black.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's fine. So David, I'll give it to you quickly. White is king h2,
Yeah.
rook d7,
Yep.
knight g3,
Yep.
pawns on h3, g2, f2,
F2. Okay.
yeah, c2, b2, and b3.
Okay. Now I remember.
And black is king h7, rook b1, bishop g6, and then pawns on h6, g7, f6, b7, a6. And then Calvin will take us through what the next move of white was.
Yeah. No. Just to tell you what's been happening, I played. So have I still got a pawn on B7?
Yes,
Yeah,
B7 and
B7 and
A6. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was black against Ljubojevic, who was already a grandmaster at that time, young grandmaster, and played the Sicilian defense. It was actually a very interesting opening. I'm not sure it was sound on my part.
Okay.
It was quite daring, but he managed. He played some interesting moves, and he eventually won a pawn. Yeah. So this is a position where he's won a pawn.
Yes.
But I've got very good counterplay. Fortunately, my rook and my bishop are very active.
Yes. B2 is hanging and C2 is hanging.
That's right. So, what was White's move now?
So white proceeded here with pawn to F4.
Yeah. It's not enough for him to just carry on taking pawns, because then I'll mop up his entire queenside pawns and it'll be a draw.
Yes.
So this F4 means that he can force my bishop to take the C2 pawn, because otherwise he plays F5 and then bishop E8, and he gets into trouble. Eventually, he plays knight to E4, threatening knight takes F6 check, and he gets onto the back rank with possible mating attacks.
Yes.
So I had to take the pawn on C2, but I wasn't too unhappy about it, because now I'm equal.
Yes.
I was worried that I was going to go down slowly, but and inevitably. So he played
knight to H5, hitting G7.
Rook takes pawn.
Rook takes B2. Rook takes G7 with check.
Just before that, White can't play rook to D2, or shouldn't play rook to D2.
Okay.
Looks like he's trapped my bishop, but then I've got rook to A2, which threatens bishop takes pawn.
B3. Nice.
So that would be completely wrong for him.
Yes.
There's a lot of tricks before and after this. Okay. So he now plays.
Rook takes G7 check.
Rook takes G7 check.
King H8, and he swings across and plays rook takes B7.
Yeah. Now the one thing I know, especially from the studies, is that if a white knight gets onto F6 with a rook on the 7th rank, you're dead.
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm not dead, because I've got this bishop on C2, which is absolutely magnificent. It's helping the rook, and it's covering A7.
Yes.
I'm okay for the moment.
Okay.
So I played rook takes B3.
Okay.
I don't mind if he swaps rooks, because even if he takes the F6 pawn, it's probably going to lose, because
the A pawn is marching.
A pawn will march too quickly.
So he plays rook C7, knocking your bishop on C2 to gain a tempo.
Yeah. So it's always tit for tat now. So I played bishop G6.
Knocking the knight.
Threatens me, I threaten him.
Yes. Knight takes F6.
And so now he's back to being a pawn up, but it's still a lot of hard work for him.
Yes.
So what did I do now?
Play the rook to b4, threatening the
Okay.
f4 pawn.
Yeah. I think that was reasonable.
Yes.
At this point, I think that maybe his best move is king g3.
Getting the king closer, yeah.
But being a study composer, I know things like that, whereas he isn't. And so he doesn't want, he wants his pawns to be marching forward like pawn to g4. But then he'll be open to too many checks. And anyway, I'm threatening the pawn on f4.
Yes, he
So
plays
what is he going to do about it?
Play the rook c6.
Rook c6. Now, this is very clever. If I play rook takes f4, then knight d5.
Both pieces.
Threatening both pieces. I can play rook d4, rook takes bishop, rook takes knight.
Both your pawns drop.
And rook takes a6.
Ah, busted.
Moreover, he could, well, I think that's definitely the best.
Yeah, that's just clean.
To play.
Clean one.
So,
the f pawn is poisoned.
Yeah.
King to g7 instead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think why I didn't play a5. Oh yes.
5. I mean, the bishop is still hanging on g6, so he still has knight d5.
Yes, so obviously.
So you need
but
to protect.
Actually, I've now got my king off the back rank.
Yes.
So I'm reasonably okay, or I thought at the time.
Yeah.
By the way, I was already in time pressure around here. So I had to think fast for a change. And he played
knight to d5.
Yeah. So he's protecting a pawn.
Yeah.
And threatening my rook.
Yes.
So I played rook to b2, right?
No, rook to d4.
D4.
Hitting the knight again.
Yes.
Then he played knight to c7, attacking the a6 pawn twice.
Yes, and also protecting the f pawn again because of knight to e6 check.
Aha.
And threatening my rook on d4 as well.
Yes, aha, still threatening knight e6.
But all is fine. Rook to d2.
Rook to d2, yes.
Threatening rook takes pawn check.
And then
or bishop to e4, take your pick.
Yes, nice. Nice tactics here in this endgame. So rook d2, and then he played knight e6 check.
Yeah, he can't play rook takes
a6
on a6 because of bishop to e4, which is really quite strong.
Yes.
And so, yeah, he played knight e6 check, did he?
Yeah, knight e6 check.
Yes, knight e6 check.
Yeah.
And you went king f7.
Yeah.
7.
And now he still can't take the a pawn because of bishop to e4.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what did he do?
He played knight c5, covering the e4 square, and they're still eyeing the a6.
That's right.
So finally, the a pawn after being...
He's done some very fine dancing with the knight.
Yes, indeed. And I must say, the a6 pawn was hanging for so long, and finally he marches.
Yeah.
So, interesting stuff. So white continues. Yes, he goes and covers the a pawn. He plays rook to a6.
Yep.
Finally, you go rook a2 as well, protecting it.
Yes.
And king to g1.
Yes, he wants to get his pawn rolling.
Aha.
I want to get my pawn rolling.
Pawn to h5?
Yeah, I want to play bishop to c2, but I don't want to lose the h pawn.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I play that. And moreover, h4 is a big threat, traditionally. So he plays G4.
D4, pawn takes pawn, and
And of course, there's another important point.
yes,
What I've really been trying to do as black is swap off as many
pawns
pawns
as possible. Yes,
That's a rule for end games. If you're down a pawn, then you should swap off all the pawns so that your opponent's only got one left. And that means, in this situation anyway, you can give up your bishop for that pawn and it's still a draw.
still a draw, yes.
Yeah.
So the more pawns we swap, the better it is for us to attain the draw.
So now it's threatening pawn to F5.
So bishop to C2 was played.
Which at the same time, every time I've got to defend, I can also counterattack at the same time, which is fantastic for the bishop.
Yes.
And the rook. And so now I've got, hopefully, black pawns are faster than white. Okay? I'm going to push this A pawn. So he's got to really get moving.
So he goes pawn to F5.
Yes.
And you go pawn to A4.
Yes.
And now G5 for him is not possible because your bishop is still covering the F5.
Exactly.
Pawn,
so he's got to do something about it.
So he goes knight to E6.
Yeah. And here is a terrific swindle. I don't know if he's winning anyway, but I could possibly have played pawn to A3, perhaps. But I was in time pressure on the second time control. You know, watching out for all these forks and things.
Yeah.
So I think it was 50, now nearly 50 moves. Anyway, it's very hard to calculate these knight moves. If I play pawn to A3, you can play knight to D4, which attacks the bishop and defends the F5 pawn, so he can play pawn to G5.
Maybe you can throw in bishop D3 perhaps and hit the rook for a moment.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
But it still looks very, very daunting. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe A3 was a good idea. But anyway, I saw a terrific way to draw the game.
I like this move. Yes, I like this move. It looks kind of scary to play, but you did it, especially in time trial.
I'm sure that it's the endgame studies that have helped me play moves like that and not be scared.
Yes.
to do it. Right. He must have thought I've gone mad. So he played knight d4 check.
So you went king to f6, the bold move, because the king is basically stepping on the same line as the rook, and he's got it discovered. So he went knight d4 check.
Yeah, the king to f6 is starting to worry his pawns, because I could possibly play bishop takes f5.
Aha.
If he gives me that chance.
Okay.
I'm not sure that it works. Knight to d4 check.
Check is still there, but sometimes it could work.
Sometimes it could work. I'm not sure. So he played knight to d4 check.
Yes.
I played king to g5.
5. Played knight takes c2.
Knight takes c2.
Rook takes c2.
Rook takes c2.
And he
must play rook takes pawn.
Rook takes pawn.
And it's a draw.
And a draw. Oof. Okay. Yeah. So now the problem for white is his king is cut off.
Yeah.
And the only way to get his king uncut is he has to use his rook. But if he uses his rook, then the g4 pawn just drops, and yeah, that's just a theoretical draw.
No, it's not. The g4 doesn't drop. The g4 doesn't drop. What happens is, say you play king f1 and rook e4.
King f1.
And then play rook e2.
King f1 and rook e4.
You just play rook e1 check. And if he plays king f2, the pawn drops.
Yes.
That's a draw.
Yes.
And if he plays rook e1, you play rook back
Is
to
rook
c2.
back to c2. Yes. So you keep the king
if
cut
it
off,
is-
or otherwise he'll drop this.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's beautiful.
David, a lovely endgame there. And as you said, I mean, this shows the tenacity because, you know, Calvin, to be a good player, you must also be able to defend well. And I think maybe that was that Haydenfeld prize that David won there in that SA close back in the day. And here we see the defensive prowess coming to the fore. But David, some lovely games that you've shown us tonight, some great stories that you've entertained with.
Can I tell you
as
quickly
well.
what happened at the end of this? When this last move,
Rook takes pawn. Takes a4.
where was it? Rook takes a4.
Yes.
And I was thinking about my my sealed move, which is going to be adjourned.
Yes.
And in fact, it was adjourned. He jumped up from his chair and he said, "Scandal! Scandal!" Right? He was absolutely furious with me, as far as I could see.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got it. I suppose I've played a dirty trick on him, which I have. All's fair in love and war, you know.
My goodness.
But there was a and the next day he quite decently agreed to a draw before we didn't have to play on.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But what eventually happened years later, when I emigrated to England, I was watching a big tournament in London. And Lubojevich was there. And I was just standing next to this pillar and I was looking at the games. This is the first outing for Nigel Short. He was a prodigy. He was playing in that tournament. Okay. And I was just watching the games. And Lubojevich was one of the players there. And he must have noticed me. I mean, it was quite a few years afterwards, 70, 80 something, you know, something near to 10 years. And he marched up to me and he said, "Friedgood," and he put his hand out to me. And
yeah.
Yeah,
you made an impression. You made an impression, David.
He's a very nice fellow, really. I think he was just very shocked what had happened.
Nice defense. Great game there.
No, David, thanks a lot for these games. And Calvin, you know, it reminds me now that there's still some great games that we haven't gone through. I mean, you know, many people look at the modern games, but actually there may be a reason why we need to look at some of these games. You know, David and Calvin, I follow Olympiad chess, South African chess, and we played our first Olympiad in '58. And in Munich, and it just shows you now that if you go to '58 and we got to 2018, that would have been 70 years that we have played there. And now, of course, David, next year will be the 30th anniversary that we are back at the Olympiad as well next year. On the 7th of June would be our anniversary of the first match against Argentina. So thank you very much you are one of our early Olympians as well. And it's really been great having an opportunity to chat with you tonight, David. So from my side, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand you back to Calvin and then ask you to just have some closing remarks. Calvin?
Okay, so thanks, Lyndon. And yeah, just from my side, David, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the show. Yeah, to see these games, like I said, some of these games look very modern. So I mean, in a way, chess can also be timeless. You showed us some beautiful stuff, and I'm definitely gonna have a look at your games. What is on the database?
Actually, have a look at the first part of this Lubojevich game.
Yes. I'll have a look.
Quite interesting. Maybe there's a blunder or something somewhere. I haven't looked at it that closely, but
Should be
I'd be very
entertaining.
interested to hear your thoughts about it.
I'll definitely have a look at that one. But yeah, from my side, thanks so much for taking your time out to join us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. The people in the chat box are also saying yeah, thanks so much for the show, guys, and so on. So thank you so much for joining us, David.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So just before we all go, guys, I just want to ask you, Lyndon, can you also let us know who is on for next week on Reflections?
You know, Calvin, when I was having this discussion earlier this month, not this month, in February, I was very glad to have David agree to be on the show. And then I decided, you know what, let me continue in this vein. And next week, our guest will be Mark Levitt. And Mark Levitt is also a modern day South African champion and also a player who's played at the Olympiads and founder of Chess Cube as well. So quite a few things, and Mark has generously agreed to give us some time at 7 o'clock next week as well. But David, any closing words from your side before we close tonight?
No, it was really nice to be back, so to speak, in South Africa for a while, and I hope all South African chess players prosper. I'd like to see some grandmasters coming forward. I hope that happens soon. I know it's very difficult because of geographical circumstances. They must be overcome. Chess is very important for everybody.
David, thank you very much, and we'll certainly be following in that footsteps by studying some of those games, particularly that game you play against Stein, the N64, and also trying to emulate your 10 out of 12 from that 64 Olympiad. David, thank you very much from my side, and it's been lovely meeting with you and chatting with you in person. Calvin, you can proceed to close the show.
Thanks, guys.
With your final words.
Thanks so much to you, Lyndon, as well, for hosting the show. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks, David. Enjoy your evening further, guys. See you next time. Cheers, cheers. Cheers, bye.